You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. Mel Kiper has a big board out, and CBS Sports has a new mock draft out. You're going to start seeing much more of this because obviously this week on the 15th, a few days ago, was the deadline for underclassmen to enter. So the draft pool is set. Like, we know what players are eligible and entered into the draft or who are draftable this year. So you're going to start to see a lot of the updated big boards and mock drafts and all that sort of stuff. Fine. Mel Kiper, I'll start with Mel's big board. And remember, the big board isn't a mock draft. The billboard is, the big board, is the top 25 players overall, any position, a ranking of the best 25, and then top 10 at every position. No surprise, Caleb Williams, number 1. He's got Marvin Harrison, 2, Drake May, 3, and Jayden Daniels, 4. This is where Kiper, on his last big board, had Jayden Daniels as well, 4th overall, the 3rd best quarterback, but 4th best player. And it was just behind him. A 5 is Rome Odunze, and then 6th overall, he's got Malik Nabers. So he's got Malik as the 6th overall player, but the 3rd best wide receiver. In the top 6, 3 quarterbacks, 3 receivers. The big news here, and that's, by the way, no change. The big news here is Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas, on Mel Kiper's previous big board, he had ranked as the 17th best player in the draft. In this update, he's got Brian Thomas number 11 overall, so up 6 spots from where he was. I don't know that there is a player in this draft that has risen as much as Thomas in the last month. We could look at Jayden and say, look, at the start of this season, Jayden was a day 3 pick, most likely, and now he might be a top 3 pick. That's massive. I mean, relative in the last month or so, and this is evidence of it. I mean, you're starting to see a lot of projections that have Brian Thomas in the top 20 of the draft overall, which, good for him. I mean, he's 6'4", 205, runs like a deer. He's got big, strong hands. He catches everything, which is so interesting as well because I went back and looked at my notes from fall camp, and one of the things that we talked about a lot in fall camp was Brian Thomas's drops in fall camp were kind of a problem. Like, they were evident, but boy, did he ever fix that. And led the FBS with 17 receiving touchdowns, and the arrow is pointing up. But there's a couple of things. Number one, so those are the only 3 players on the big board. But still, for LSU to have 3 players in the top 25, 3 in the top 11 is pretty incredible. Tells you why LSU's offense was so good. But the only other player that Kiper mentions, remember, he does the top 25, and then he does the top 10 at every position. The only other player that Mel Kiper ranks anywhere is Mekhi Wingo as the 7th best defensive tackle in this year's draft. Now, the Tigers may have more than 4 players drafted. Mason Smith could get picked, probably will get picked. There's opportunities for other guys that might hear their name called. But I think, number one, this is evidence of how little veteran talent LSU had on this team, certainly on the defensive side. But also, I think there's an illustration of excitement for next year, because if you don't have a heavy draft class, you're not losing a bunch of guys to the draft. So that's a catch-22, but the positive side of it is Will Campbell, Emory Jones, Mason Taylor, Harold Perkins, Whit Week,
Mason Taylor!
Veteran guys like Savion Jones, Jaquelin Jacobian Guillory coming back, like Garrett Dellinger, Miles Frazier. I'm not telling you even next year that Dellinger and Frazier and Guillory are going to be dudes that are, top 100 picks in the draft. They might not be. But they're dudes that have played a ton of college football at really important positions on the interior of the line. So I kind of look at that both ways. Yeah, admittedly, there's a little bit of spin zone there, but if you want the positive spin, that's it. I mean, you get big physical interior players who have been around for 3 and 4 and 5 years now in college, and they're returning at 21, 22, 23 years old. Yes, I think that's a net positive for your program. So 2 ways to look at that. The other thing was that Josh Edwards over at CBS Sports put out a mock draft today. And I think we're seeing a lot of the same picks, which is to be expected. like most everybody, not most everybody, but a lot of the mock drafts that you're going to see right now have Jayden Daniels going number 3 overall to the New England Patriots. That's where Josh Edwards of CBS Sports has. So he's got Caleb Williams, 1 to the Bears, Drake May 2 to Washington, and then Jayden Daniels going number 3 to the New England Patriots, followed by Marvin Harrison Jr. 4 to Arizona. He's got Malik Nabers 6 to the Giants. He's got Brian Thomas actually significantly lower. He's got him going, unfortunately, within the division to Tampa at 26 overall. It would be hard to imagine Brian Thomas at this point falling to 26, considering how much his star has risen. But I'd hate to see him in Tampa. But either way, if he ends up a first-round pick, that would be fantastic. The thing in this mock draft, though, that I found most interesting was who he had the Saints taking at 14. Again, this is Josh Edwards over at CBS Sports. His latest mock draft is out right now. And he's got the Saints at 14 overall taking Byron Murphy, the defensive lineman out of Texas. Now, this is not a knock on Byron Murphy. Byron Murphy is a really good interior player. I mean, he's 6'1", 308. He was one of those dudes that was a physical run stuffer in the middle and also could pressure the pocket. So you could do far worse than drafting a big, strong, physical interior lineman at 14 overall. But it always comes back to the question of, are you drafting need or position? Or best available, I mean. Are you drafting need or best available? Because Byron Murphy may be the best available at 14, but boy, I think interior defensive line would be 5th at best on my positions of need. Number 1 is offensive line. Even if you get Ryan Ramczyk back, you're likely replacing the left side of your line, and it looks like Trevor Penning is a bust. So offensive line's 1. I think wide receiver has to be right there as well because you don't know about Michael Thomas's future. Safety, I mean, Tyrann Mathieu ain't getting any younger. Are you convinced Jordan Howden is going to be a starter in the NFL? And linebacker. I know Demario Davis was just second-team All-Pro, but he's 35 years old. Like, you have to start considering the possibility of what happens then and what also with Pete Werner. I mean, only then would I really get to interior defensive line. So I understand drafting the best available player, the highest-ranked player on your board. But it would be really tough to justify going interior defensive line, going defensive tackle back-to-back seasons in round 1. But if you have Byron Murphy and Brian Brzee, you would have a dominant interior tandem for quite some time with those two guys playing side by side. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.